sister's a therapist and I tell jokes. We both want to help all kinds of folks.
Hello, and welcome to My Sister's a Therapist. My name is Virginia Jones, and I'm a stand-up comedian, but my sister's a therapist.
Hello, I'm Virginia Jones' sister. My name is Laura Ryan, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist.
So that's one of us. If you haven't listened to us before, this is the podcast where a comedian and a therapist who are sisters kind of like chop it up, the issues of the day, cultural movements.
You like to use the word zeitgeist. I'll say that. So today's topic was inspired by a woman that I have done business with for years. I don't want to call this person out, so I'm just going to say I've done business with this woman, and I have found her to be rude, impatient, and entitled throughout much of our relationship. And I sent her an email and she didn't respond for kind of a while. So I looked her name up to see, like, is she still in business? I assumed she was still alive, but I thought, is she still in business? And when I looked up her name, I found an arrest record for probably pistol whipping someone, assault with a deadly weapon.
Some kind of assault.
Right. So that kind of confirmed what I believe about this woman, which is that she's a very angry person.
Right. It's very funny that the thing that she got popped for, it's like that's the central issue you have with her is the issue that she had a challenge with the law.
This is a recurring problem in her life, and I'm hoping that she's addressing it. We'll see. But yeah, so I saw her mugshots, which were interesting. But yes, what I decided to talk about because of her was anger. Anger is our topic for today. So anger is often called a secondary emotion because we sort of resort to anger as a way to protect ourselves or to cover up other vulnerable feelings. So like I remember in one of my textbooks, there was a picture of an iceberg and there was a person standing on top waving and saying, hi, I feel great. And then as you look at the iceberg, the first feeling on there is anger, and then it's depression, and then it's, low self-esteem, etc. So anger is like an iceberg, and we only see some of the emotions that are visible, and the other emotions exist below the waterline where they are not immediately obvious to outside observers. So have you ever been angry, Virginia?
Well, because I am so not traumatized and extremely well processed and sane, no, I've never been angry. But when I am angry now, when I have been angry, one of the things I do try to do is say, what is this? Why am I feeling this way? What is it really? And a lot of times it's fear.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's jealousy.
Hmm.
And the fear is usually like when I'm feeling attacked or belittled or somehow otherwise like disrespected, I think.
Right.
And that's something that I'm trying to let go of because I'm an adult and I don't need everybody to treat me like a princess, right?
Right.
Have you ever been angry?
No.
I didn't think that.
I get angry probably multiple times a week, I would say.
Do you think it has a lot to do with the person you live with?
Doubtful. He's so chill. So yeah, my son he has a loose relationship with time. And so I find most of my anger happens at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day because I'm trying to maintain a schedule. And I figured it out recently, that it is fear because I'm afraid of him being late for school and having a tardy. And then I'm going to be viewed as a bad parent. So it's tough. So I'm going to read from my favorite book about anger, Anger Busting 101, The New ABCs for Angry Men and the Women Who Love Them by Newton Hightower. I actually contacted Newton a few years ago because I have a lot of angry women in my practice. And I said, can we write one for women? And he said, I'm retired. You can write one for women if you feel like it. So
that does sound like something for you to do.
Yeah, that sounds like your project, madam. I'm not going to bother with that. But he has this anger self-assessment. So I'm going to read some of the things off of the assessment. I've had trouble on the job because of my temper. People say that I fly off the handle easily. I don't show my anger, but when I do look out, this one I hear a lot from people. I still get angry when I think of bad things people did to me in the past. So yeah, that seems to be a really common theme of it's like these unprocessed feelings. Because the problem with anger is it doesn't actually touch the real problem. It's just sort of like, I look at it as like taking a dump on somebody. I do the release valve. I release the anger and then I feel better, but I don't actually deal with the problem.
Right. It's a temporary, like it floods your system, right? You feel better in the moment. It's temporary. Let's talk about Karens, right?
Yeah.
Like I had a very close friend in college who was like my first Karen. And she would save up her anger and, her frustration with school and her frustration with her parents, her problems in romantic relationships. And she would save it up and then she would blow it up on somebody in the service industry.
Wow.
And really just let them have it. And like when you hear about like kids like who are waiters and servers and retail people like who get screamed at all the time,
right?
It's because they are the very bottom rung. Like this person can't scream at their boss. They don't want to scream at their spouse. They're trying not to scream at their kids, but they can scream at this kid in the Gap. Like, what could be so pressing that you need to scream at someone in a retail environment? Like, what could be?
You don't have my jean size. Well,
Right.
It's interesting because speaking to that idea, I remember in college, we talked a lot about obviously emotional stuff, but one of the themes was anger. And I remember one of my professors said, it's kind of interesting because it follows the lines of capitalism and patriarchy. He said, so the guy at work gets yelled at by his boss. He comes home and yells at his wife. She yells at the kids and the kids kick the dog. So it's true. It's like something that you can catch. It's like COVID and it goes all the way down. So I think anger does have a positive purpose if we do it correctly, right? So in an article by Bernard Golden, What Constitutes Healthy Anger? He says, consistent with the rebelliousness of the 60s and 70s and the me generation of the 70s, we suggested that being angry, as long as it remained verbal, would provide release for anger's tension. But in the ensuing years, it was found to actually escalate anger, provoke anger in others, and increase one's stress. So when angry, the problem with anger is that we are putting our attention outward on the person or situation that contributes to our anger. And in doing this, we get caught up in the whirlwind of anger, and it diminishes the awareness of our own bodies and the inherent tension associated with anger. So feelings of threat and other negative feelings that precede it, these moments do not allow for self-reflection. So we don't actually resolve whatever the feeling is that we were experiencing.
The thing about the husband and the wife and the dog and the kids, not only does it roll downhill, it gets taught to children that this is an okay way to behave and even a desirable way to behave.
Right.
So
right.
let's talk about assessment of anger.
Okay.
Is that the next idea?
By contrast, healthy anger demands reflection, the capacity to pause and assess whether the threat we feel is real and imminent, and to determine the urgency of the situation and respond appropriately and constructively. So if we talk about family anger, I had a really interesting experience as an adult woman. I was at your dad's house. I think you were there too. And I don't remember. I remember at the time I was in a relationship with a very angry and aggressive person, and I was really struggling. And we were all on the couch. I think it was like Christmas Eve, maybe. And everybody, we were going to watch something on TV because we're an American family. And so there was something that all of us collectively wanted to watch, but Dad wanted to watch a dogs doing funny things show, right? And so he got outvoted. And I watched this adult man, my father, stand up abruptly from the couch, throw the remote on the floor, and then stomp up the stairs and sulk. And I thought, oh my God, I'm dating my dad. How wonderful. Anger goes through relationships.
Now, you spoke earlier about how when someone just wants to release anger, it's like taking it's my least favorite metaphor that you use, but there it is. And we've talked about how bizarre it is. We've both been in relationships with men with anger issues, right? And how bizarre it is because once they've exploded at you and gotten their rage out, like they recover in minutes.
Right. Because
they've
taken
they've gotten that temporary rush of, dopamine, good body feeling. They have released their thing. They feel like they've spoken their mind or, really told you something. And it really made me feel unsafe because I would still be discombobulated and activated and upset at the thing that had happened. And then I'm living with this person who's like, well, I feel fine now.
Right. Why are you not happy? Even though I just told you that you were a worthless slob. I hate looking at your face.
Marc Maron, who, bless him, has worked through a lot of his stuff and had a lot of stuff to work through. I heard him tell a story on his podcast about one time he was in Wyoming and he was told he needed to be at Red Rocks at sunset.
Okay.
And so he and his partner at the time, they get in the car, but they don't get in on the road at the time that he would like. And so he's just like activated and furious and driving like a maniac. And they miss the sunset, but he's decided to the most important thing. And they get to Red Rocks and he turns to her and he was like, oh, don't worry, I'm not angry anymore. And then she's angry. And he was really surprised. He's like, oh, how did this happen? And because you've just put this crummy feeling on another person.
Right. And I think in the same way that you can share joy and positive emotion, it's very much like, I remember when I was in this relationship with this person, it felt like I was just like a sponge and, absorbing all of that energy. And it was really unpleasant because it did take me back to our dad and the stuff that he did. So interesting that you brought Marc Maron. I know has a addiction history. The author of Anger Busting 101 also has an addiction history. And so he looks at anger as kind of like the last bastion of addiction. And so he talks about anger as like basically putting a plug in the jug and not allowing yourself to do this thing, which I have complicated feelings about. But some of the things he says: when you're feeling angry, stop speaking. Stop staying in an environment. Stop staring when you're angry. Stop interrupting people no matter what. Stop cursing. Stop name calling. Stop threatening. Stop pointing. When you point, it's very aggressive and it actually kind of creates more anger. Stop yelling, raising your voice, or speaking in a mean tone. Stop being sarcastic. Stop mocking. Stop throwing things. Stop banging walls. Stop all non-affectionate touching. Stop sighing, clucking, rolling your eyes. Stop criticizing. Stop lecturing. Stop speeding. Apparently people who speed also have anger problems because they're impatient and entitled, right? Because I feel like ultimately what anger comes back to is entitlement.
I would like you to ask you a question. When you say anger is putting a plug in the jug, yes, what do you mean by that?
Oh, that's an old AA term. Your jug of liquor, you got to put a plug in that jug and not drink. Right? It's an old-timey...
But you're saying that anger is a drug.
According to Newton Hightower, that's his perspective, right? I think that is a good step one, is when I'm in a moment, not allowing myself to just do whatever, like taking a minute and thinking about it. But I think it is a little bit more nuanced than that. I think another part of it is asking myself, why do I feel entitled to kind of rage on a person?
What about this situation has made me feel angry? Because you and I have both experienced anger that seemingly comes from nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
And so having the clarity to say, why am I feeling angry? And then why do I feel entitled to act that way? And I'm a little activated just with that list, because if this person had been able to do that,
right, then we would be in a different position. Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, and that's why he looks at it as an addiction, because it gets to a point where I do not have control over my faculties because I allow myself and give myself permission to engage in these behaviors.
And I know semi-close friends with another person in recovery who, to her own admission, has anger issues. And so that's interesting framing that I hadn't thought of before, but it is it can be a drug seeking, right? Yes. It makes blowing up and makes you being that person makes you feel better temporarily.
Right.
Makes you feel justified.
Right. And I would say most, if not all of the people I've ever worked with on anger management, they have comorbid, they have some addiction issues. Because I think when it comes to addiction issues and when it comes to anger, both things are trying to avoid feeling the actual feeling. Right. And why would I want to avoid feeling the actual feeling? Because the feeling makes me feel vulnerable. And when I can be angry, it makes me feel strong and powerful and in control, entitled, and also entitlement. I see that a lot in anger management and in drug and alcohol problems. we're just going to go all in today. I had an experience with a partner recently where he was quiet. And I've discovered, because of my dad and because of past partnerships, when I see a quiet, kind of angry looking man, I get very triggered and I feel really, really emotionally overwhelmed. So we were on a beach in Hawaii and I started feeling myself get really frustrated and starting to feel kind of scared. And so I just checked it out and I was like, hey, are you like super pissed off right now because you're not talking to me or not making eye contact? And the story that I'm making up is that you're about to yell at me. Am I right? And he said, no. He said,
I'm just being quiet.
He said, I'm just tired. Right. So our trauma can really affect our relationships in lots of ways. But I think having people in your life, I mean, I feel like in both of our parents' cases, they were both very angry. Mom wasn't intimidating, but she was very, unpredictable and screamed a lot. I think although, it's part of the imago, right? The thing that I studied and you've practiced before is, we kind of build up all of our ideas about our adult relationships based on our childhood relationships. So it's easy to get dysregulated and triggered when someone is doing some of the things that a parent or family member used to do.
So we've been talking about all the different appearances that anger can have and the way it kind of messes with your frontal cortex, right? And keeps you from processing information in a rational way. And this reminds me of the hot dog story.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let me just throw this out there. The prefrontal cortex, what it does is it helps to see other people as friends. And it helps to see the humanity in other people. And when we're angry, we can't access that. So I remember my ex was working on his anger stuff. And I remember I came home and I was sorting the mail and I noticed that there was a pot with hot dogs in it. Why would you boil your hot dogs? I don't know. Yeah, it was gross. But I noticed that the water was like coming to a boil and I was not very close to the stove. And I just said, hey, you may want to turn that down. It looks like it's going to boil over. And I saw his body stiffen. He said, I feel like what you were just saying to me just then was that I'm an idiot and I don't know how to cook. And you were judging me harshly for what was going on. And I was completely, to coin a British phrase, I was completely gobsmacked. I did not see that coming. That was not my intention at all. That's part of the problem. When you get into that mindset all the time, you start to perceive neutral things as aggressive.
Right. It's like the opposite of rose-colored glasses, right?
It's dirt-colored glasses. Since anger is something that happens to everybody, how do we deal with it in a way that's not destructive, right? I like to think of anger when I'm feeling it. It's like a little canary in the coal mine. It's trying to tell me something. And so I think of anger as, okay, I'm feeling something. So what is it? And again, in this article that I read earlier, what I quoted earlier, healthy anger. So here are some ideas about how to have healthy anger. It means observing and experiencing anger without being overwhelmed by it. It means recognizing the anger as a signal to explore feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. Healthy anger means viewing your anger as a signal to direct our attention inward, to look at our core desires and our needs and our values. Healthy anger calls for developing self-compassion, which includes developing skills to enhance our sense of safety and connection. It includes developing strategies to let go of anger, which may include forgiving other people and forgiving ourselves. Compassionate practices that don't cause suffering for others or for ourselves.
I really like all of that, and I have stumbled upon that kind of by accident in my own life.
Right.
Another thing that I want to talk about or mention is like how much work it is to really let go of anger. Like my individual therapist, when we were talking about my partner's anger, and I said, he said, well, what is he doing? And I'm like, well, he's reading a book and he's going to try to get on ADHD meds and we're really hoping that will help. And he said, and he felt strongly that it's not his job to tell me what to do, right?
Right.
But his job to help me recognize stuff.
Right.
And he said, it's interesting that he's got a book. It's interesting that he is trying to make progress. But he says, I've worked with angry men, and angry men need so much more. They need group therapy.
Right.
They need talk therapy.
Right.
It's more than just learning a skill, right? And he
Right.
said, this person is years and years away from getting to where you need them to be. And I spent another year thinking that wasn't true, and now it's now.
And you found out that it was true. Spoiler alert, it was true. And that was the conclusion I eventually arrived at with this partnership. Like I made him go to group therapy. He went to individual therapy. We incorporated weekly massage. He had weekly massage appointments to manage his feelings. He went into AA. I mean, I did all the things, but
everything you could.
Right. But like you said, it's a multi-year process, I think. When we're getting to the point where people are wanting to end relationships with you because of this thing, it's probably too late already. So Jean Holthaus wrote an article called Deciphering Anger, What It's Trying to Tell You. And so she said, unlike fear and sadness, anger provides a surge of energy that makes us feel powerful and in charge rather than vulnerable and helpless. So we've all seen this happen. So thinking about a hungry infant, the infant's first cry is a cry of distress because the child legitimately needs to eat and has no capacity to fulfill this need. When the feeling of hunger, vulnerability, powerlessness becomes too distressing, the child becomes angry to distance themselves from these feelings and to signal that there's a problem. And until the underlying issues of hunger and vulnerability are attended to, the anger remains.
That's crazy. You don't think about that being a tool that people are using pre-verbally.
Yes. I mean, I experienced it a lot with my son. I discovered, like, especially when he was an infant, I got really, really triggered by him because I had been in this, domestic abuse situation, and having even a very tiny man scream at me was still very triggering. But that thing you were talking about where I'm okay now. I remember one day he was in his swing and he was screaming like bloody murder at me, like his, the worst, think of the worst child scream you've ever heard. Yes. Yeah. Red face, bulging neck, just screaming in my face nonstop. And then suddenly he just took a turn and he started smiling and making goo goo gaga sound. And I was like, okay, cool. My kid's a sociopath. This is amazing. But yeah, I think if we look at it as it has a purpose, there's a reason for it. There's a reason we're all doing it. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? So when I look at anger as a signal of something that I need to do, like we talked about this TikTok that I watched where there were these men in the Black liberation movement and they were talking to this Asian woman and white man. And the Asian woman and white man were saying, well, hey, you got to be at peace. And the guy said, hey, when I'm liberated, I'll be at peace. Until then, right. I'm going to feel angry.
Because right now, what you're telling me is I'm not making you comfortable.
Right.
Like that what you want is for you to keep feeling comfortable. And that involves me not acting angry.
Right.
And like that, I mean, we've talked about it between the two of us. Like that is a very popular way of telling minorities and women to shut up. People will say like, well, you're acting so angry. If you weren't such an angry feminist, but that is getting off topic. So the topic is anger has a purpose and it is to draw attention immediately to a need.
Right. So it can be a good thing. It gives you a way to express negative feelings. And also sometimes it can help to motivate you to, change your situation or find a solution to your problem. I have found at different moments in my life when anger was felt and then processed, I was able to sit back and go, okay, all right, so this thing made me angry. What do I need to do to solve? Right. I think
it indicates something that's not working.
Right. And I don't have to throw up on other people. I can just sit back and enjoy. So here's another personal example. I was looking in the workbook that goes along with Anger Busting 101. So there's an accompanying workbook and I found a life example from my life. This was 2009, maybe 2008. It was actually Halloween. It was Halloween related.
So it was on a night just like this.
Just like tonight. So who was involved? Me and my partner. When did it happen? Saturday morning. Where did it happen? Living room. What was the trigger? Laura didn't know where the Halloween costumes were and suggested the partner had put them away. What happened next? Partner got angry and stormed off. He ignored Laura for 30 minutes, and when she left and said she loved him, even though he was mad at her, he said he was disappointed. 4 hours later, Laura returned. Partner brought up the costumes again. The argument commenced. Laura became angry and said what she thought, and partner decided he would not go to the movies and he would not speak to her or listen to her. This left Laura feeling frustrated, dissatisfied, rejected, blamed, and hopeless. So much like alcohol.
That's one of my favorite patterns. You're having an argument. You say, okay, well, I'm going to leave the house, and maybe it's for a reason, and maybe it's just to get away from the argument. And then you come back, and it's like the other person has just been frozen in time,
right,
waiting to be angry.
That means that person has not dealt with or looked at the actual problem, right? And honestly, when I look back at this, I remember it happening, and I don't even remember why he was triggered by that. It was just, I guess he felt like I was blaming him or something, or I don't know. And
maybe you know where they are.
Right. And so it said, it would have been so much better if partner had asked where the costumes were. Laura told them that she didn't know, and partner asked Laura if she would be willing to set aside time later to help and look for them. Like that. I don't know if we ever found the costume. Maybe we never even celebrated Halloween that year because of this argument.
Well, and that's another marker of angry men or angry people that we've been talking about, is that they will punish you by getting angry before an event or like something that you want to do together.
Right.
And their solve is, well, now I can't do it because I'm too angry.
Right. And again, with the women I have worked with, they also do the same things. And I think ultimately what I have experienced in a professional capacity is that people with anger are just trying to control the situation. They want
so that they can feel safe.
Right. So that they can feel safe. So that they can, like, I had a client in the past who he was in recovery, and he had this really difficult child, and he really struggled dealing with this child. And, a lot what we kind of came back to was, well, this child isn't treating me with respect, and I deserve respect because I'm their parent. And I'm like, well, where did we get that impression?
Where does that come? Who told you that?
Who told you that? And then, of course, we go up the apple tree, and it always goes back to the family board. So yeah, like, it's very difficult to know how to do this right, because we don't really have markers in our society for how to do this right. And if I am going to circle back to men, I think that one of the problems with our internalized patriarchy, misogyny, is that we teach boys that they can't have other feelings, right? And I remember reading somewhere that up into the age of, I think it's 15, boys cry like 5 to 1 amount that girls cry. And then at 15, it's just like a total cutoff. And I have experienced this lately with my son, and I try really hard to say, buddy, you're upset, and it's okay to cry, and I want you to cry, and I want you to feel all the feelings that you're having, and I don't want you to feel ashamed of crying, because it's a natural, healthy part of feelings.
Well, yeah, I was going to come in and say the same thing. I do have empathy for men because anger is the only emotion they are permitted to have. Anger is the only manly emotion. So you just have to tamp everything down,
right? And
then it just gets covered with anger. But yes, I'd like to talk a little bit more about healthy anger and healthy expressions of anger, because not to make our whole episode about this person, but one of the challenges I've been having is I would say, hey, I won't be yelled at. I won't be talked to in this way. And the person would accuse me of, well, you're just trying to get me to bottle up my feelings.
Right.
And that's not healthy. But I'm like, but I was like, you can feel whatever you want, and your feelings are not wrong.
Right.
But you can't treat me this way.
Right. It's okay for you to have whatever feelings come up for you, but it's not okay to yell at me. I've had this conversation multiple times with multiple people in my life. I feel like it's an ongoing, unending conversation. And, I've even said this to my son. It's like, hey, I know you're frustrated, bud. I understand why you're frustrated. Nobody wants to fold their clothes. Nobody wants to not have access to a device, their clothes are folded. But also, screaming at me is just going to make me dislike you. And it's going to make me want to help you less than before.
It's not going to solve the problem.
Right. How can we make our anger useful? So in mind.org UK, they suggest feeling angry about something can help us to identify problems like we talked about before, It can help protect us from things that are hurting us. It can help us to feel more energized and focus on a task. It can motivate us to push for changes in the world and help others who are being treated badly. It can help us to challenge and stand against injustice and discrimination. It can help us to defend ourselves in dangerous situations. But I think, I remember in my own life, I was swimming at the gym and there was this truly awful woman who,
Look, we're not all great.
we don't need to go into a lot of details, but she basically stole my swimming lane for no particular reason and kind of
other lanes available.
There were 4 lanes available. She decided she wanted mine and she hopped into my lane while I was swimming. It was super aggressive. And so I thought, okay, I guess I could get in a fist fight with this old lady at the gym, but that's going to cost me a lot. So instead, I'm going to aggressively swim next to her and splash her continuously for the next 45 minutes. And what I found...
And so here we see how both of your behavior is great.
Both of them are great. But the end result was, because I did not scream at her or physically assault her, I still have a gym membership. I still have access to that pool. And also, I did work through the feelings. And I have found that, I remember once I was having a really difficult time with a person I was officing with, and I was really trying to think it through, and I was really, really angry. And I found that just aggressively punching the water, swimming, kicking as hard as I could and pushing really hard on the water helped me to get it out of my body without hurting people.
I had a lot of the same experiences. I used to box and coach boxing, and I was ending a relationship and found it very helpful to get those feelings out physically a lot of the time. And I don't have that outlet now because dog walking doesn't have the same oomph.
Especially with a dog with small legs.
Yes.
You can't really aggressively run with a dog with tiny little nothing legs.
No, he's going to get left behind. So I do want to bring up something that you pointed out to me a couple months ago that I hadn't recognized as being an expression of anger or an outlet for anger. But this person was getting in arguments on Facebook, and everybody has been in an internet argument, and eventually you learn that it is a waste of time.
Right.
You get flooded. You're going to spend 2 hours refreshing to see what did that say next. And in the end, you're not going to convince them. They're not going to convince you. It's a waste of time.
It's a lose-lose.
It's a lose-lose. But they would want to tell me these elaborate stories about this head on Facebook. And what you explained to me was this is a hero story.
Right.
Where they are reliving what they feel is righteous indignation and anger, but it's just another drug for them.
Right.
And
it's drug-seeking behavior. Right. I remember this ex-partner told me this hero story. That was also on the list of things that you should avoid, but I didn't want to go into what a hero story is. So a hero story is explaining how I stood up for myself and I'm a hero because I did this aggressive thing. So my ex was telling me about this hero story where he was at a train station and he was yelling at the train attendant because he'd messed up his ticket or something. And I just thought, wow, that's super weird. That seems abnormal.
A real weird thing to get mad about, bro. And you're right. This lesson that I won't be talked to this way does affect other parts of my life. Besides my romantic relationships, I've been having a big issue with somebody at work.
Yeah.
And who is a woman.
Yes.
And I told her, this is a professional relationship and I didn't make this mistake you're accusing me of making. But hey, even if I had,
right,
you can't yell at me. Even if I had done it on purpose,
right,
you can't yell at me.
It's not appropriate to yell at me.
It's not appropriate.
Even if I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, this is my thought. Unless I actively murdered your child in front of you, you're not allowed to scream at me.
There's never a time unlike you can use this in other places.
There is that one time, but we don't do that. One doesn't happen very often.
Right. When is it appropriate to yell at the ticket guy at the train station? Never.
Literally never. Yeah.
Probably never.
So circling back to lady anger, Jean Holthaus also talks about once you've identified the underlying emotion, ask yourself, what would help me address this emotion effectively? So maybe your boss could ask herself that question. She said, if I'm angry with my husband for sitting on the couch while I clean, the underlying emotion might be fear fear that the relationship is always going to be off balance, fear that my husband does not value me and sees me as a servant, fear of my need for downtime never being met. By identifying the fear, I can decide how to talk to this person rather than simply blowing up about not getting help cleaning.
Yeah, because there's always a deeper thing underneath. It just sometimes takes a little digging.
It takes some doing to figure it out, and it's work and it's hard, and it's not as easy as just throwing up on somebody. Right. So yeah, I think the trick ultimately for me, the thing that I've learned to manage my feelings is I don't have to talk about this right now, and giving myself kind of the space to think about and process the thing. So the emotions of anger release chemicals in your body, preparing you to flee, fight, or freeze so that you won't be hurt. So it takes a minute for the chemicals to dissipate. So this is something that I tell couples when I'm working with them. If you're a man, you're going to quicken just because of our bodies. You're going to get angry quicker, but it's going to release quicker too. So I tell...
Really, that's a gender difference.
Yeah, it's a gender difference. And it has to do with testosterone. So you're going to ramp up really quick, but you're going to release really quick. So for most women, it takes about 90 minutes to process anger before they can you don't have access to your neocortex when you're in one of those places. So I can't calmly talk to you about my feelings when I don't have access to my neocortex. So I remember when I was in this relationship with this man, I had a very old cat and she needed special prescription food. So I decided, because it was happening at about 10 p.m., hey, I'm going to go to the 24-hour vet right now and pick up cat food. And I walked into the 24-hour vet and they were playing the film, The Little Mermaid. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to have a seat. I'm just going to watch this movie. And I found out after the whole movie that I felt fine. But it did take 90 minutes. But yeah, I just remember that I tested it and I was like, okay, so it really does take me.
This is the time frame it takes.
It takes me 90 minutes. So when I was, interestingly, in this workbook, it said what happens when you're angry, and you had to do a drawing. And the drawing was him on the couch with a remote, and then me in the guest room on the couch with the remote, because I would just go watch a movie and I would take 90 minutes and not speak. So, okay. So in closing, what are your final thoughts about anger?
Well, I think my final thoughts about anger are, it's hard to acknowledge because we don't want to feel like we are caveman people, but
Right.
Every single person gets angry. Every single person experiences anger. My tendency is to stuff it, and that's not a lasting solve. I do recognize that men are encouraged to get and stay angry. So this whole thing is going to be a bigger challenge for them. But that we all need to recognize, when you're angry, why am I angry? What am I trying to solve? And what's the thing I need to do to get out of it? What do you think?
So the thing you just said reminded me of a study done by Megan Barlow. And one thing she said was that they found that by experiencing anger daily, it's related to higher levels of inflammation and chronic illness. So bottling it up ain't the solve. So anger is an energizing emotion that can help motivate people to pursue life goals. But if you just stuff it, it just lives in your cells.
Well, as a great man once said, man who used to be great, Jon Lydon of PIL, anger is an energy.
That's true. Those are deep lyrics. But so, yeah, I think my final thought is that it's okay and it's even healthy to feel angry. That's an okay feeling. But you have to remember that it's a secondary emotion. It's always masking another emotion. And that other emotion is probably going to make you feel vulnerable. So taking a minute, or taking 90 minutes, in fact, to process through your feelings in whatever way seems healthy for you is the right thing. But the problem comes in when you start bringing other people into your processing of anger. And I think, it's perfectly okay to talk to people calmly about your concerns, but it's never, ever okay to scream in people's faces. That is abusive behavior.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode.
It was pretty funny, I think.
Laura, if people want to write us about anger or questions about it or questions about any mental health stuff, where can they find us?
Well, they can find us at hello@mysistersatherapist.com. Virginia, where can people find you personally on social medias?
So my social media is mostly my comedy and my TikTok, and that is all hooked to the word Badinia, Badinia. Laura, where can people find you in a professional capacity?
If they want to find me in a professional capacity, they can find me at lauraryan.org. If they want to find me in a TikTok capacity, I am Laura Ryan.
In the meantime, I want to thank everybody who's been listening. We've had great response to our first couple of podcasts. We are getting numbers that put us in the top 25% of downloads on Apple and Spotify podcasts. That's super
Woohoo!
exciting for us. Woohoo! So if you do like this podcast, please subscribe. Please leave us a nice comment. That would be absolutely delightful.
Tell
Until
your
next
local
time,
bus driver and do everything you can to tell the lady at the grocery store how good this podcast is.
Yes.
So in the
when the
meantime,
person is checking you out at Trader Joe's and they go, "Oh wow, have you tried this pumpkin cracker before?" You can go,
hey,
"No, but I got to tell you about this podcast I'm listening to." That's how we're going to really grow.
It's really something. Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye.